Hi, my name is Alyssa Smith,
And I'm Mariah Sherman.
and we are going to talk about the motor development of hula hooping. So the infantile reflexes that we consider to be the most important for sufficient hula hooping in adulthood included the stepping reflex, symmetrical tonic neck, the crawling reflex, labyrinthine righting, derotative righting, and parachute, making sure to note that we're tilting the baby in all directions. So here is an example of the three most important reflexes that we consider for kids to go through in order to be sufficient at hula hooping. The first one is labyrinthine righting, making sure that the head is staying with the horizon. The next one is the stepping reflex, by lifting the baby up, and if their feet is against a flat surface, they'll go in a stepping motion, and then the parachute reflex. Some infantile constraints that go with hula hooping. For individual, a functional constraint includes motivation, attention span, and mental capacity for motor planning and development. At this point, as you see to the right, the baby is probably just going to put the hula hoop in their mouth and not do much else. A structural constraint includes the size, their muscle development and strength, and their brain development and size as well. They can't even probably hold their head up, so they're probably not going to be able to do much in terms of actually being able to hula hoop. An environmental constraint includes the size of an area to move, how much tummy time they're getting, and access to caretakers to assess proper development, as well as lots of access to toys and play. The more time they're able to develop gross motor skills and be able to move around, the better they're probably going to be able to develop the skills later on in adolescence and adulthood. And at this point, any task constraints include the size of the hula hoop that you might be giving the baby, as well as any body parts that they're trying to use to hula hoop, but again, this is probably just going to be focused on their hands and mouth. In childhood, the coordination can be different. Circumduction is incredibly necessary. At this point, those kids might not know how to actually coordinate their movements. There's lots of lateral and front and backward foot movement, as well as balance strategies, including the ankle, knee, and hip, in order to maintain proper posture while they're doing it. For their coordination, they have to be able to stand upright on 2 feet and shift their weight from their hips from one foot to another, as well as using tactile localization to feel where the hula hoop is and move their hips and body accordingly. Usually this is in the anterior and posterior iliac spine. They must be able to eventually keep their head upright and their arms not completely in high guard as the movement progresses, and this usually comes with practice. Their body angle is constantly changing at the angle of the hips, with their knees bent slightly, but usually not more than 20 degrees, and their ankles are usually dorsiflexed slightly on the ground to allow for hip and knee movement. There's lateral flexion and extension, but in early childhood, all of these angles might be minimal, and there's lots of extra torque and force that's not necessarily coordinated to keep the hula hoop going around. Their posture tends to be upright. Their heads should not be tilted. Their hips can tilt forward and back, as well as the spine being laterally flexed and extended. But usually these movements aren't exaggerated, and they tend to remain upright and not really know how to put all these movements together. But the body isn't necessarily stiff. Instead, it's a little bit more loosey-goosey. Some childhood constraints include their attention span, ability to listen to instructions, internal motivation to be successful, as well as improve their skills. At this point, if your friends aren't really doing it, you might not necessarily be doing it either, and it's how much access you might have to it during recess. A structural constraint still includes the size, musculoskeletal development, the coordination of the hips, knees, and ankles, and this just comes from the fact that the kids are still growing at a very rapid rate. Some might be small, some might be larger, and because of that, they might not necessarily know how to coordinate their body, especially if their body has any awkward growth spurts. Some environmental constraints include how much time they're spent practicing inside versus outside, as well as how much time is given by their parents for exploration and practice. If their parents aren't giving them access to hula hoops or they don't have access to hula hoops at school, they're probably not going to increase their skills. There's lots of whether or not they have access to information on skill improvement, as well as peer access for play. If their peers aren't going to be doing it, they're not going to be doing it either. Some task constraints are moving up to how much time is allotted to hula hoop. Usually this is recess time, what the size of the hula hoop is, as well as its weight. And then if there are any rules or games now, since the kids have probably progressed from just basic hula hooping to any games that might be involved with it.
Hooping as shown by children. The first one is an adorable little girl in a grocery store.
You can try it again.
So you can see she functionally might not understand how to keep the hoop above her hips, but she definitely has some rotation and spastic movements going on. And then here is Alyssa, who is equally adorable, showing us the motor behavior that children show when hula hooping. Arms are in high guard, functionally just not able to keep it going. But here's an example of a child who's actually very proficient in hula hooping.
Show.
Wow. And then what do I do? Arms up?
Multitasking.
Arms out? Do I count when I do it?
Yeah. How do I do it like this? One.
Okay, so after childhood, we go into the adolescence period, and adolescents show much more coordination during hula hooping. This is usually when they reach their maximum ability to hula hoop in the normal, average fashion. So they must be able to improve fluidity and hip movements with the hoop. They must be able to feel anterior and posterior iliac spine in coordination with the hoop. Learning to make small knee and ankle adjustments, so they're slightly less spastic than younger children. And they've been able to feel the somatosensor input of a successful hula hooping. Once they understand how to achieve it, they're able to maintain that motion. They have a better understanding of the movement, basically. Their body angle is more upright, they have less lateral movement, and they have smaller, more fluid adjustments. The posture is upright, relaxed, and usually they will have access to a hoop and know which hoop is best sized for them. Like I said, this is also the age group where you maximize your ability to hula hoop on the average level. So at this age, typically you're going to have social pressure to stop hula hooping. Most people see it as a younger child's a younger toy for kids. So if you're at the adolescent age, you may continue to do hula hooping in the form of dance or other coordinated movements. So functionally, it's a matter of motivation. Structurally, you're going through puberty changes, so for girls, you're going to have a change in hip size, but for the most part, this isn't going to affect your ability to hula hoop. Environmentally, there's the social pressure, and the task is also changing depending on if you're just hula hooping or trying to incorporate it into a dance. So here we have two examples of adolescents, or I guess maybe myself trying to be adolescent. So you're able to make adjustments when necessary, but for the most part able to maintain the hula hoop. And then at this age group, you can also attempt to do different movement patterns. So as you see, this little boy is pretty proficient in going on one leg and switching up his movement patterns. So into adulthood, again, this is an activity usually seen by children. So as an adult, you might not have as much time to practice. Sometimes the ability to hula hoop goes down. Your coordination is affected by your flexion, extension, abduction, and adduction of the hips. So your gyration of the hips sometimes goes down, especially as you get older. That flexion extension becomes harder. Your body angle also changes. Once you reach into older adulthood, it might regress to earlier stages of hula hooping if it's been a long time since you've hula hooped. And your posture is upright, but you have minimal sway. Again, this is functionally, you're maybe able to understand how to do it, but structurally, body fat and physical fitness can get in the way. Environmentally, you might not have as much access to hula hoop. Due to being an adult, you don't need access to a hoop. If you have children who have hula hoops, then maybe you will be more likely to do it once in a while. And the task is just trying to hula hoop or participate in something more. So again, if you're dancing as an adult or something like that. So here we have an example of me attempting to show motor behavior of an older adult while hula hooping with minimal hip movements. And here on the right, we have a video that is very interesting that shows how therapy and hula hoop can kind of go together to improve physical fitness.
Adult services. I love sharing hula hooping with people. It has got so many benefits for your physical and mental well-being. It's a fantastic cardio workout. It improves your posture, flexibility, balance, muscle tone and strength. And it's so much fun. You get to work your body and the brain at the same time. And as you're learning this new skill, you're using...
Okay, and then as we wind down here, we can see an example of both of Alyssa and myself doing our best hula hooping. Sometimes you sign up for a project on hula hooping and you realize after starting that you can't actually hula hoop. So I'm not going to say any names, but that might have happened. Here's Alyssa doing her darndest. And here I am trying to incorporate dance and hula hooping together. So I just want to thank everybody for watching and hope that you learned quite a bit about hula hooping today. We certainly had a little bit of fun putting it together, and have a nice summer.